So last time you were talking about scope, and one of the interesting things that you mentioned was boundaries, and that part of scope is about defining boundaries. I think we all know that, but I've seen a lot of scopes which, let's just say, haven't put that right at the front, and sometimes that gets dealt with later on in the nitty gritty of the contracts and the interfaces. So talk to me about boundaries. Don't address what I've just said. Just talk to me about boundaries in the context of project scope.
Boundaries in the context of project scope are about defining what is included and excluded from the project. They set clear limits on the project's deliverables, ensuring that the team and stakeholders have a shared understanding of what will be delivered. These boundaries help prevent scope creep, where uncontrolled changes or growth in the project scope occur, by providing a reference point for decision making throughout the project lifecycle.
Thank you very much. So let's be specific with an example of how a boundary, let's do a non-geographical boundary for now, because probably even most scopes manage to do the geographic boundaries. Give me a couple of examples of what I would look for in the scope document that is a good description of a non-geographical boundary that matters, right?
Sure. A non-geographical boundary in a scope document could relate to technology or processes. For example, one boundary could be specifying that the project will only use existing software platforms, excluding the development or purchase of new software. Another example could be limiting the project's focus to improving internal processes, explicitly excluding customer-facing applications. These boundaries help contain the project's scope and clarify what is off limits.
Yeah, that's good. And your examples make me think about what we were talking about before, which is the visual component of scope. It's a visual metaphor. And I do wonder whether boundaries like the ones you describe would actually be easier for project staff to understand if we saw them on a series of blueprints and actually see them as drawn boundaries. So how would you draw, for example, the boundaries that you mentioned there, or would that not be useful or possible?
Visualizing boundaries can indeed make them more tangible for project staff. For the software boundary, imagine a diagram showing the existing platforms in use, with a clear line around them indicating that only those within the boundary are included. For the process improvement boundary, a flowchart of internal processes could be marked to show which areas are in scope, leaving out customer-facing elements. While not always traditional in project management, such visual aids could be adapted to make boundaries clearer and more accessible.
Yeah, thank you. So here's a tricky one. So your discussion about boundaries makes me think about open sets and what happens as you get close to the boundary, and whether the boundary is included in the scope or is by definition excluded from the scope, the actual line of the boundary. Talk to me about open sets and your take on whether the boundary is normally included or excluded. And you probably better explain what an open set is.
Great question. In mathematics, an open set is a set that does not include its boundary. If you imagine a circle drawn on a piece of paper, the open set would include all the points inside the circle, but not the points on the circle itself. Applying this concept to project scope, boundaries are often defined as being outside the scope, akin to an open set. This means the work within the project stops just before reaching the boundary, ensuring clarity on what is included and what is not. However, In practice, the treatment of boundaries can vary, and some projects might consider certain boundary elements as included for the sake of thoroughness or risk management.
Thank you. I think we better wrap up now, and we'll come back later on with another project concept. Over to you for a couple of sentences on anything important about boundaries you think we've missed out.
All right, to wrap up on boundaries, one key aspect to remember is that they serve as a reference for decision making. Whenever changes or new requests arise, boundaries help determine if they fall within the project's original scope. They are not just constraints, but tools for maintaining focus and ensuring the project delivers on its intended outcomes. Looking forward to our next chat on project concepts.
Yeah, that one's nails. Thank you.